Hi, I'm Dr. Russ, and this is Unit 4. How can I make sure information is credible? In Unit 3, you learned how to come up with search terms to look for information on the internet. But before you start looking for information, you need to know how to determine that the information that you find is credible. Why is this important? Because anybody can put information on the internet that says anything that they want to. They can say that the earth is flat, which we know is not true, or they can say that it's round. So, how do we sort all this out? The truth from the false, the good from the bad? There's ways to do that. So, let's get started. In this video, we'll learn how to determine if a source is credible or not. We'll also learn what sources are more likely to be credible than others. Then we're going to take time to learn a little bit about APA 7th edition style, because that's what you will be using to write your research papers in. And then finally, we'll talk about the assignment for this week. So the goal for this unit is to use your learning on your own to provide credible evidence to support claims in your paper. So how do we determine if a source is credible? We say that something is credible if we can believe it is true and we can trust it to be correct. So how can we test for credibility? There is a test called the CRAP test that will help us determine whether a source is credible or not. CRAP is an acronym that stands for currency, relevance, authority, accuracy, and purpose. So let's look at each of those criteria. Currency means asking, is the source up to date? If we found a research article that said in 1968, Smith compared two groups of people and found such and such, would that information really be good for us? Lots has changed since 1968, so that source is not up to date. Generally, we like to use sources that have been published in the last 5 to 7 years. There is one exception. Certain sources, generally those that describe some kind of a theory, may be quite old, maybe up to 20 years old. And we can use old sources sometimes if we have a good reason to, but generally we try to use recent ones. Relevance. We don't want to fill our paper full of information that has nothing to do with our topic. So we always have to look at a source and say, is it really relevant to my topic? Is the information in there going to support the claims I make? Authority. As we mentioned earlier, anybody can publish anything out on the internet. So we need to ask, where is the source published? Is it published by an academic publishing company or a university? Or is it published by some kind of company that's trying to sell a product or something? Who is the author of the article? Is the author qualified to even write on this topic? Do they know anything about it? And are they considered reputable and trustworthy in their field? Are they an expert on this topic? Accuracy. As we saw earlier in academic writing, whenever we make claims, we need to support them by evidence. That's true not only for what we write, but for what other people write. We need to know whether the source has evidence to support the claims that are in it. And if so, are those claims cited correctly? When an author cites some sort of evidence that they got from another place, you need to be able to go to that place and get the information yourself. And so the author needs to provide all the information you need to go get that. And finally, we need to look at the author's purpose. What was their motive behind publishing this source? Was this really a piece of research done to try to inform people about things? Or is it really trying to sell you a product or a service? Or is it trying to change your opinion about something? So, some sources are more likely to be credible than others. Let's see what those are. There are three types of sources that we can find online. Primary sources are firsthand evidence that gives direct access to your research topic. So there's usually clues in the source that you find. Like you may be reading a study by Oscar Blia, and Oscar writes, we studied two groups of people about something or other, and we found something about those people. A secondary source is secondhand information that analyzes, describes, summarizes, or evaluates primary sources. In other words, it's a second person who's talking about what the primary source did. So, for example, if we're looking at an article, it may say something like, Oscar Blia studied two groups of people and found this and that. And Jerome Washington studied three groups of people and found this, that, and the other thing. So we're not hearing from the actual people that did the research. We're hearing from somebody that's talking about what they did. And finally, there are tertiary sources. These are sources that simply list primary and secondary sources, or perhaps summarize them in some general way that you don't get to see a lot of the detail in the original sources. For example, a tertiary source might say, Blia, Washington, and four other people studied all these other people, and together they all found that so and so. So our primary sources are the best sources, and we want to use mostly primary sources in our paper. Secondary sources are still good, but we don't want to use nearly as many as those as primary sources. And tertiary sources are really poor sources. We want to try to avoid them or use as few of them as possible. One thing that we really prefer for academic writing is academic journals because they themselves are academic writing. They often have trustworthy and credible content, and they're considered one of the most reliable resources. Plus, good journal articles are peer-reviewed. What does that mean? When a journal is peer-reviewed, expert reviewers decide whether a submission should be accepted for publication or not based upon a set of criteria. And many search engines have a checkbox to say, I only want peer-reviewed articles. When you're checking the credibility of a journal article, You can ask all the questions in the CRAP test plus 3 more questions. Is the journal indexed in academic databases such as ERIC or EBSCO? And ERIC is one of the open access databases that you can use. Has the author of the article published other articles? If this person is really an expert in their field, they've probably published quite a few articles on the topic, not just one. And has the author been cited by other scholars? So again, if they are an expert in their field, other people have probably referred to their work in their own papers. And you can tell by looking at cited by in Google Scholar. That tells how many people cited their article. So what about news sites? They can be both credible and not credible. What are the characteristics of each? First, let's look at the characteristics of a credible news site. Well, one of the things that makes a news site credible is when you have a reporter who witnesses something and then writes about it. That makes them a primary source. Reporter who interviews somebody who witnessed something is also a primary source. However, a reporter who analyzes what happened is a secondary source because you're only kind of getting part of the information, their analysis, maybe not a detailed report. And some news sites just aren't credible. For one thing, a reporter may be biased. For example, they might be liberal or conservative and write from that viewpoint. Or they may be pro-government or anti-government and write from that viewpoint. A reporter may also choose to present the truth or part of the truth just to get you to reach a certain conclusion. And finally, a reporter may exaggerate to get people to read their articles. Okay, let's talk a little bit about APA 7th edition style. What do we mean when we say APA 7th edition style? At the LICC, academic papers follow a book called the Publication Manual of the American Psychological Association, 7th edition. This book is full of rules that cover mechanics, which is how you do headings and capitalizations, italics and things in your paper. It tells how you do tables and figures in your paper. It tells how you paraphrase, and quote in your paper. It tells how you do in-text citations, and it tells how you create reference lists or a bibliography. Fortunately, you don't have to have this whole book to follow the APA 7th edition style. In this course, there are 2 resources that you can get that will go a long way towards helping you. One is called the APA Style Citation Reference List Overview, 7th edition, and the other is called the University of Alberta Library APA Citation Style Quick Guide. But if you need more help than this, there is also the APA Style website, which has a lot of information on it taken from the style guide. One set of information on that website is a series of short articles that you can read, and they're in the style and grammar guidelines. Or if you prefer to watch videos rather than read things, there are also tutorials and webinars. So I encourage you to use all these things to make sure that you follow APA style. Now let's look at the Unit 4 assignment. You're going to draft a bibliography in APA format. Okay, let's break that down. The first thing we're going to do is, if we're going to write a bibliography, we have to have some sources to use. So you need to go and find 20 to 30 sources that support your approved topic. And when you're looking for them, be sure to use sources that you can read online or download. For each of those 20 to 30 sources you find, if the title looks like it might support your topic, then go ahead and get the source and read its abstract or its introduction. If you don't know what an abstract is, it's kind of a short review of the whole article that shows up at the very beginning. If the abstract or introduction convinces you that the source would be good to reference in your paper, then go ahead and evaluate the source using the CRAP test. And remember, there's 3 additional questions you can ask if it's a journal article. Then finally, if the source appears credible, you can create a reference for it. So you should end up with at least 8 references out of the 20 or 30 that you found. So if you choose to use Google Scholar to look for your sources, when you find articles, if they have a hot link on the right side of the article, you can download it by clicking that hot link. However, if you don't see anything on the right, it's in the second example here, if you click on the article, you will see something, but it's something that you have to pay for. So we're just going for the free articles here. So choose the ones that have a hot link on the right. Open access databases such as ERIC usually have something that lets you know whether you can get the source for free. So take ERIC for an example. In the first article we see, there is a link, a hot link called download full text. So you can get that article. But in the second one, it says direct link. That is not an article that you can get. So again, there's some sort of thing in most search engines, such as full text available or PDF available, that will let you know whether you can get it. Writing references can be a little tricky, but fortunately, there is some good help out there. For example, the Google Scholar has a hot link called Cite. And if you click on it, a pop-up will come up that shows the reference. Just go down to the one that says APA and then copy that and paste it into your paper. So once you've gone through and found about 30 articles and evaluated them for credibility and picked 8, put those 8 references into a document. Just put your name and your approved topic at the top, and then put the 8 references. So how will we evaluate you on this assignment? First of all, the topic must be in the paper and it must be consistent with the approved topic. Secondly, there must be 8 references. Third, the reference must be at least close to the APA 7th edition format. And finally, as always, you need to submit your assignment by the due date.